The purpose of this session is to discuss the role of a global private sector and how we promote disability initiatives in the private sector. My guests are Hiro Shibuya, Special Advisor to the Nippon Foundation, on my right. And on my left, I have Brandon Roach, Senior Disability Consultant with Business Disability Forum. So two experts in the field. We're going to start with a presentation by Hiro. Hiro, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Yves. He said two experts. I think probably my best qualification to be sitting here is that I am not expert on disability. Without being funny about it, that we wanted to present as just as a talking points yet another research, and particularly having heard that the last 3 or 4 hours, particularly in the morning session, maybe what we are undertaking might be some redundancy, but I think we have some focus which could strengthen a business case for corporate sectors. So I just wanted to sort of walk through what we're intending to do. Let me just be rather obvious for those of you experts who are sitting there listening to non-expert of me. We see the business case for people with disability continues to evolve. It tends to be sort of going between mandatory to voluntary efforts. It's, as you see, it's obvious. Oh, I'm pushing it, wrong one. Direct employment and legislation regulations, and ratings return on defense scheme, AKA my old friend Rick Donovan kind of things, and corporate social responsibility. The subject matter of this conference, obviously, future work, we sort of look at this as an emerging line of inquiry, as a business case for people with disability. It builds on key trends, which you've been discussing the last 3 or 4 years, so I'm not dwelling on it. Particularly last 2 hours, I was sitting there listening to artificial intelligence, so I'm not going to get into that, and automation, and business processing, insourcing, both insourcing, outsourcing. These are the information technology as enabling factors. There was some very critical debates earlier about the data, but it is in the corporate sector. There is massive data-centric restrictions going on, more and more so. And also, the information technology involves effective recruitment, job matching, and digital talent platforms and so forth, which again was discussed earlier, so I'm not going to dwell on it. Am I going? I'm going backwards here. All right. Let me just sort of throw figures and data, which you might not necessarily have seen. It's more the macro sense. Our research centers on gig work. Why not? It's not new. It's succeeded by impact implication of both disruption, redefinition, and decentralization of business activities. Just let me give you some macro data. We sort of using it as a basis on which set the framework research that we are undertaking. By 2020, self-employed workers in the United States is projected to triple to 42 million people. Freelancers are the fastest growing labor group in the European Union. Many countries are seeing a decline birth rate, reducing the size of labor pool. By 2030, social talent shortage could reach 85 million people, costing companies maybe trillion is too exaggerated, billions of dollars of lost economic opportunity. The organizations of all sizes are turning to the gig economy into global phenomena. The gig economy continues to grow as global organizations expect to make greater use of contingent workers. Our research is not intended to be definitive, but encourage business research on people with disability that advances organizational change management, applied innovation, investment, public policies, and economic development. Our primary methodology is quantitative, supported by quantitative data. And pro-business perspective, and we are actually engaging some of your colleagues from Accenture, IBM, and a leading IT company in San Francisco. In fact, at this point, we're not involved in disability experts, although we intended to have some of your friends who are here who might like to know to serve as a peer group to review our initial findings. We also not, I say again, I heard earlier about the danger, flip side of data. We are engaging in data analysis, but also we are looking into text analytics, which, as you know, are utilized by a major corporation increasingly. I'm just sort of introducing you. Our research, and we hope to use it at the gathering we're planning to organize in August of 2020 at the time of Olympics and Paralympics. Our foundation is very involved in it, and we have two major events planned. One is a festival of creative performing arts by people with disability. The intention is to empowering people at the time of Paralympics. And we are having a forum and symposia, both intended for the Japanese leadership and media, as well as some of our friends from this gathering and others, based on research results. And we are also talking to Caroline, the valuable 500 results of her effort would be announced at Davos, as you know, and we shall see how we could consolidate some of those things into what I essentially understand. Stefan, who's here, is also contemplating some form of ongoing, shall I say, ongoing reference point to push our initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hiro. Although you're not an expert, we appreciate your expertise. Thank you. I'm now going to give the floor to Brandon Roach from Business Disability Forum. Brandon.
Thank you, Yves. Thank you, Hiro. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back at the GBDN conference. It gets better every year that I am here, bigger and better. So my name is Brendan. I work for the Business Disability Forum. We are a UK-based membership organisation. We work with about 300 organisations, and our mission is to transform the life chances of people with disabilities by supporting organisations to get better at recruiting and retaining people with disabilities, and also by providing customer service and excellent service provision to people with disabilities. So Stefan has asked me to talk today about a relatively recent development in our work, and this is work that has been driven by the proportion of our members and partners who are global. So of the 300 organizations that we support, roughly 50% of them are global. And what we've seen, certainly over the last few years, is a bit of a we've talked about demographics a lot today, but a slight demographic shift in terms of the people that we work directly with. So we've been around for around 30 years supporting people who traditionally have a remit for their company's approach to inclusion that is focused on the UK or perhaps the UK and Ireland. But more often now we're working directly with people that have regional responsibility or indeed global responsibility for their company's approach to inclusion and disability. So our initial response to that was to bring those members together, those that have that interest in developing a more global approach to disability inclusion. And what we did was to, do I have slides, Peter? Wait. Ah, there it is, yeah. Okay, I'm looking at the wrong screen. So the first thing we did then was to convene what started out as a relatively small group of our members. So we had an initial meeting of our global task force only 18 months ago. We had about 5 companies at that initial meeting. That's grown quite rapidly over the last 18 months. So our task force now comprises of 28 companies and counting. You'll see from the slides that we share a number of members with the GBDN, which we're thrilled about, so the likes of Accenture, Atos, Total and Sodexo. And we also really appreciate Jürgen and Stefan joining our quarterly meetings as well, and I know our members appreciate the regular updates that they get from the GBDN. So really the initial purpose for the task force was really to do 2 things. So it's to provide our members who are global with a forum to essentially swap notes, to share challenges and successful approaches to developing a more global approach to disability inclusion. And we also wanted to develop some practical tools and resources that will speak directly to this cohort from amongst our membership. So the first task that we set ourselves was to develop what we call our global business disability framework. So our members in the UK were able to access a tool that we call the Disability Standard, which helps an organisation to measure and improve its approach to disability inclusion across a range of different business areas. So you'll see here on the screen, we've got 10 areas 10 functional areas of a business. This is really because one of our key concepts at BDF is that disability impacts on every aspect of a business. So it's not just a retention issue, it's not just an HR issue. It's just as relevant to technology, which we've talked a lot about today, the built environment, supply chain, and a number of other areas. So what we did then was to look at our existing tool, which has been used successfully in the UK, and to develop the content so that it was relevant to those from among our membership that have this global responsibility for their organisation's approach to disability inclusion. So I mentioned the 10 areas of the business. Underneath each area is a set of criteria that's set against a maturity scale. So we have 10 levels of maturity that go from awareness through to embedding and advancing and to leading. And to give you an idea of some of the criteria, for example, that sits under each area, if we look at commitment, level 1 might include factors like encouraging a culture of best practice across your global operations. So a commitment to go beyond legal compliance. It looks at things like adopting a broad definition of disability at a corporate level that's based around, so the the UN Convention definition. And as you move through the levels of maturity, we're looking at criteria that might include things like leading conversations about disability as a global business issue, perhaps by positioning disability as a board agenda issue, joining programs like the Valuable 500, for example, which you'll hear more about later. So it's really about driving and leading the conversation at the higher levels of maturity. So we launched the framework last year at the UK government's Global Disability Summit. And for the previous year, our members have been really testing the application of this tool in kind of real world settings. And the feedback is that it's proving really useful as a means of engaging global functional heads in conversations about how disability impacts on their function. It's helping global leads to identify barriers and gaps in global processes, tools, and resources. And it's also fostering conversations with colleagues at country level about how they can interpret the corporate ambition to do better at disability inclusion and implement that in a way that is culturally and legally appropriate for their context. We had a really good example at a recent Global Task Force meeting, actually, just a couple of weeks ago, where a project lead from Shell was updating the group on using the tool, and they had convened leads from India, from Poland, from Malaysia, and from the Philippines, and used this framework. And there was just some great feedback around the impact that using this tool had had. It had enabled them to identify some great practice in a variety of markets that can then be shared with across the global organization. It also enabled the organization to identify some gaps that were specific to particular countries, but also some common barriers, which then provide global leads with a real set of priorities where they can make the most difference by making a difference to those global processes. Okay, the second thing that I was going to update you on is some research that is actually live at the moment. So those of you that work for a global organization will have the opportunity to input into this research if you haven't already. So sponsored by our partner at Shell, what we wanted to do was, through the global task force, through the companies that were using the global framework, we were starting to build quite a rich but really anecdotal picture of the challenges and some successful approaches to developing a global approach to disability inclusion. But we recognized that there was nothing that really consolidated or quantified all of these things in one place. So we wanted to address that. And the way that we chose to do that was through this research project. So far, we have carried out in-depth interviews with 22 members of our global task force. So these are designated global disability leads within their companies. And we now have a survey that is open for us to try and reach out to a much wider cohort of people, so to reach beyond our global task force and out of our membership as well. The survey's still live, but I thought you might be interested in just a few kind of interim and initial findings, which I will share with you now. So what the companies are telling us about the key challenges. So we've attempted to summarize them in 6 areas. As I say, this is an evolving piece of work, so the final outputs may differ, but we're seeing that key challenges lie around the cultural differences, so in the way that disability is understood across different countries and in different markets. The challenge of gathering insights from people with a range of disabilities across a range of different regions and countries. The varying legal requirements across markets, across countries, so it's particularly relevant where quotas exist. We're also finding that very few organizations can quantify the total amount of money that they spend on fines or social contributions for non-compliance with quotas. The few that do, they're eye-watering amounts, as you can imagine. So you've got an interesting situation where even an organisation that is committed to best practice, when they're thinking about disability globally, legal compliance is also a driver in a way that you wouldn't otherwise expect it to be. There's a challenge in terms of developing consistent policies and processes. So how do you operationalize a global commitment to best practice around disability? And there are challenges around how you engage with different markets that are at different levels of maturity, and also developing a common language around disability as well. So, persons with disabilities, disabled people, people of determination, these really, whether this is the right thing to say or the wrong thing to say really depends on who you're talking to and where you're having the conversation. So how do you find a common language around disability at the corporate level? So the other thing that the research will do is it will outline some of the good practice and some of the practical steps that companies can take. And we know from the Global Task Force that there is already some really good work underway. So just a few examples. So HSBC, for example, now have a global disability confidence program sponsored by the group chief finance officer, who himself has a hearing impairment, speaks openly about it. They're looking at workplace adjustments, data, know-how, but across the global organization. Our partners at Shell, who I mentioned before, are developing a global approach to making workplace accommodations, which now is available to 48,000 employees across 37 countries. Unilever, again, CEO endorsed global program, bringing together colleagues with disabilities virtually to share experiences, but also putting those colleagues directly in front of the CEO to share those experiences is really great practice as well. And also bringing disability leads from markets ranging from the UK, Canada, Sri Lanka, and Nigeria together for a 2-day conference is great practice as well. So we're almost at time, so I've just sped up slightly at the end. So the survey is live. So if you do have global responsibility for inclusion in your company, we would love to incorporate your views and your experience. So there's a QR code. If you're able to capture that, feel free to. And I also have included the link on the conference app, which I know Jürgen will be very happy about because it shows that we're all using the conference app, and very good it is too. Okay, so I think that's probably about time, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Brendan. We have 1 minute just to thank our 2 experts, even if one of them say that he's not an expert. And we'll have to, well, feel free to reach out to them independently after this session today. After this day, they will be more than happy to answer all your questions because we don't have time to do that now. So sorry for that. And thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Hiro.
Thank you.